Socrates and Steve Jobs. Do you see a connection? Let's connect the dots. Just imagine Athens, a market scene, bustling with people, and suddenly you see a figure, a short, stubby figure walking up to you and asking questions about virtue, asking questions about how you live your life, asking questions about what's a source of knowledge. What will be your response? I'm talking about Socrates here. That's what he did. Every single day, he used to walk around this marketplaces of Athens, engaging in conversation, talking to young people, asking very basic questions. And the best part about Socrates was he was a great conversationalist. Oratory is different. Standing and speaking in front of a big audience, that's oratory. But Socrates was a great conversationalist. He could hold a conversation. And the best part about him was the way he used to hold a conversation was he used to ask you a question. On the basis of your response, he used to build the next question. That's how the conversation went on. And what actually he was doing was he was raising very important questions of life. He was raising very important questions of how to live our lives. Now, these questions attracted two kinds of responses. One, the young people loved these questions because these questions made people think. But at the same time, it made him equally unpopular also. He became unpopular among seniors in Athens because they didn't like the idea of people questioning gods. They didn't like the idea of people questioning the rulers. They didn't like the idea of people questioning the basic values. But Socrates did that. He encouraged people to question. And this unpopularity slowly made him so unpopular that he was arrested. He was arrested and tried. And in that trial, Socrates makes one of the most greatest statements in Western philosophy. And the statement is, the life which is unexamined is not worth living. Examining life, that's a key theme of the statement. And today we intend to explore that statement, examining life, or what exactly is unexamined life is all about. Let's do that. What does unexamined life mean? Now, during my ethics classes in universities and everywhere, I usually ask this question to students. What does Socrates mean when he uses the phrase unexamined life? And the students usually give me the standard responses. Examining here means to look into one's life. Examining here means to question our values or to introspect. Basically, the responses hinge around the word introspect. But Socrates meant something deeper. Now, to understand that in-depth meaning of what Socrates was trying to say here, let's read the original statement of Socrates. The greatest good of a man is daily to converse about virtue, and all that concerning which you hear me examining myself and others, and that the life which is unexamined is not worth living. When Socrates spoke about examining life, he had four things in mind. The first thing that Socrates meant was investigating into our virtues. What Socrates was trying to imply is we should daily investigate the virtues around which we build a life. In fact, his entire ethics was built around investigating virtues of justice, investigating virtues of knowledge. He was very popular. He, in fact, emphasized that it's only by self-examination of virtues that we have, we will be able to build a good life. So what he was trying to imply here is, if you have to live a good life, you have to examine and investigate your own virtues. Examining life also means looking for that ethical basis of life. So when Socrates says examining life, it also implies we should look for the ethical foundations around which we can build our life. So that's also examining life, examining the moral basis of our life, examining our moral values, examining our moral principles around which we all can build a life, rather a good life. The third aspect of examining life, according to Socrates, was reflecting and scrutinizing actions. What Socrates meant by reflecting and scrutinizing actions is, he was of the opinion that we should not follow law blindly. We should not adhere to social norms blindly. We should not hold on to values and principles blindly. We should question them. Along with questioning the norms and the values and the principles, he also encouraged us to question our own actions. Why am I doing it? How my actions are going to impact others? And most importantly, his biggest question was, when you reflect over your actions, you should ask yourself these questions. Are these actions consistent with my principles? Are these actions consistent with my values? Now, this is what examining life is all about. And if you don't examine all these things, your life is not worth living. It's like pointless. It's like just you're performing your actions without any goal, without any understanding. So it's only examining that helps us understand our actions, understand the reasons why we hold certain values, understand reasons why I'm adhering to some social norms. The last aspect of examining life, according to Socrates, was examine and realize our humanity. What Socrates was trying to imply here is, to be human, one has to learn. To be human, one has to inquire. And if you don't inquire and learn, you cease to be a human being. Interesting, right? Now, what Socrates was trying to imply here is that in order to be a human being, we have to learn to live a philosophical life. That is a life of inquiry. Inquire into your human nature, inquire into your values, inquire about your life. Inquiry. And inquiry is based on self-reflection. You should be able to reflect. Now, this is what later Thoreau spoke about in his works. Thoreau in Walden writes, "To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, but so to love wisdom as to live according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust." Later, echoing Thoreau, Gandhi also said the same thing. Simple living, high thinking. In short, when Socrates talks about examining life, he's encouraging us to inquire, examine our values, examine our ethical foundations of living. And this is what appealed to Steve Jobs as well. The spirit of inquiry, questioning, reasoning, why? And that's precisely the reason Steve Jobs said in one of his interviews with Newsweek that he would like to trade all his technology for one afternoon with Socrates. So that shows the impact of Socrates on Steve Jobs' life. We explored Socrates' idea of unexamined life from philosophical perspective. Now let's, in brief, try to understand its implication in public services. Now, when we start applying this concept of, or this idea of unexamined life, not worth living in public service perspective, it would imply a public servant should examine every policy before implementing. A public servant should examine every procedure before implementing. So the idea here is not to question, but to examine its relevance, to examine its utility to a stakeholder. Now, I think that's what a wise public servant should do also. Examine before implementing. To wrap up, to make our lives worth living, we need to examine our virtues, we need to reflect on our actions, and lastly, we need to realize our humanity. That's Socrates' advice for us. Now, I want you all to also examine your life and let me know how it goes in the comment section. So long, happy learning.